Jay, thank you for joining us, and thank you for coming east, young man, to head the NIH here. And yes, 4 degrees under your belt. You're not going to have time for a fifth right now. You have a full-time job. But both you and I have spent our life looking at data. It's driven your life. It's driven my life. And sometimes when you're young and you read all this data and you listen to what people are saying and it's wrong, you wonder, why are people saying things when it's not in the data and it's not in the experience? So you've now been serving as the NIH director for 8 months. What's been the biggest surprise stepping into the role? How has that informed your perspective on what the NIH does? You had opinions before. Now that you're the director, what has this experience been? And we should let everyone know there's a lot of misconceptions in the world, but one of those is the NIH budget is not being cut. So we just want to start there. You might have seen a headline that has misled you. And Jay, how's it been?
It's been interesting 8 months. I've spent my career as an academic, 25 years as a professor at Stanford. I arrived at the NIH. In some ways, I'm an unusual candidate. I have a PhD in economics as well as my MD. It's not the typical path to be an NIH director. But I think, in a way, the problems the NIH faces, I have some sense that it needed somebody who both was inside the NIH world, like as I was, but also was a critic on the outside. I think that there's, in the last panel that people were talking about the lack of trust that people have. I mean, there was a Pew study, a Pew poll in November of last year that 1 in 4 Americans don't trust scientists to act in the best interest of the public. It's a disaster. To me, the thing that's been surprised me the most, in answer to your question, is there still is amazing science and a desire to accomplish the mission of the NIH inside the NIH. The desire to use research to advance health of the American people, that unifies everybody, I think. The most pleasant surprise I've had is that almost everyone I talk to in Congress, in the administration, they want the NIH to succeed in that way. And that's been, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised by it. I think the parts are there to restore the trust of the American public with scientists. We have to make some changes to try to understand why we've lost so much trust. But to me, that's been the most pleasant surprise.
So I'd like to just step back, and since I'm the moderator, I get to put this up for the 1,203rd time. And so what is the driving force that's driven the world over these centuries? And that has been how precious life is that you're focused on. And since you have an economist and a PhD, and you even worked at RAND in your career, that 50% of all economic growth, 50%, can be traced to advances in public health and medical research. And the extension of life by humankind from 4 million years of work, we extended life expectancy by 11 years. And in the last 125 years or so, we've increased it by more than 40. And the amazing facts are, it isn't just the extension of life, but it's the quality of life. And so today, you were born in India. Let's talk about your American dream. We opened this center across from the White House and the Treasury a month or so ago, the Center for Advancing the American Dream. What is your story? What's the road to the NIH director?
So I was born in India in 1968. The life expectancy of boys born in India in 1968 was 48, and I'm 57. So it's just just as I guess I've outlived my life expectancy. this story that you just told is one of the most important stories in all of human history, right? The huge advance in life expectancy. And maybe the 50% number is probably, I mean, I don't know if the number is right. It's probably too low, right? All the advances in sanitation, all the advances in medicine, all of the advances in public health that led to the rise in life expectancy fundamentally are rooted in excellent science, like better knowledge about the way the world works. The last 10, 15 years, actually, the U.S. has seen no change in life expectancy. It's been flat. That's one of the reasons why we have a crisis that we have. We have to make sure that the science that we do translates over to advances in life expectancy. I came to the United States when I was 3. My dad was a rocket scientist. He had a PhD in electrical engineering. Came to the U.S. during a recession, and he worked in McDonald's before I came.
Let's talk about how did he get in the U.S.? Didn't you win a lottery?
He won a lottery. So in 1965, before I was born, he came to the U.S. to study for his PhD. Went back to India, got married, had some kids, me, my brother, and then in 1971, he applied for the visa lottery in 1966, and then 1971 he won the visa lottery, and then my mom brought me and my brother across the world. First time she was ever on an airplane. Apparently I threw up on it. There's a whole family history around this. But yeah, it was a visa lottery that brought my dad to the U.S. And then after working at McDonald's, he then got a job building jet engines for General Electric, and then missile guidance.
Okay, so was the job in McDonald's preparation to build jet engines and things?
I think my dad had an ethic of working hard. He had 7 brothers and sisters. His dad, my grandfather, had died very early, and so he sent money back to take care of them for basically almost his entire life. And that work ethic, I think, carried over into his work in the defense industry.
So some of the people, Jay, in the audience have heard me point out that I have this investment theory. The minute a company announces they appoint the CEO who was born in India, you should buy the stock. So in Microsoft, the stock's gone up $2 trillion since they brought in an Indian CEO. And in Alphabet, Google, it's gone up $1.5 trillion since they brought a CEO. And today, we have the World Bank led by a person that was born in India also. And so maybe you're the trend here.
I mean, if you could invest in the NIH, it'd be good. I mean, actually, we all can, right? So in a sense, we do as American taxpayers. I think the United States is an incredible place. It's the home to so many brilliant people. It's not just Indian Americans that are capable of leadership, as you know well, Michael. And I think that, to me, the idea that the U.S. has seen its worst days is just not true. Like there's really nowhere else on the earth still that has the kind of dynamism and commitment to investments that make advances in knowledge anywhere. And I'm really, really high on the United States. The fact that my mom, she grew up in a Calcutta slum, and I'm the NIH director, that's nowhere else on earth could that happen. And Americans are among the most generous, kindest people on the earth.
So today, many other nations are investing heavily in the life sciences and biomedical research. And how do you see the NIH role, not only ensuring U.S. leadership, but interacting around the world?
Well, the U.S. is not, as you know, not alone in our investments in biomedicine. There's huge investments in Europe, huge investments around the world. The biggest challenge I see is the investments that China has made in biomedicine. The idea that China is somehow not doing derivative science is behind is just not true. They've invested tremendously in biomedicine. We've trained a generation of their top biomedical scientists. A lot of the IP that we have here, a lot of the ideas we develop here essentially get mimicked in China very rapidly, and also they're making investments. In the next century, China will play a tremendously important role in the advancement of biomedicine. The question is, how will we interact with China? And I mean, I can tell you, I can see two scenarios, neither of which I think is likely to be the case given the current state of the world. But one is a nightmare, which is, at the end of the World War II, there was a divorce between the Soviet Union and the United States, right? They were allies with us in World War II, and the scientific worlds broke in two. There was a Soviet science and there was American science. That's one future scenario with China. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's a possibility. And what does that look like in biomedicine? It'll set the world behind for a generation. The other scenario, which is the scenario that we've had the last 30 years, where essentially Chinese medical scientists come to the United States, we train them, they work here, they go back to the country, and then they develop the capacity for China to do research in biomedicine. When we make, for instance, cells, the cell therapy for cancer, like using CRISPR, much of the manufacturing for that for patients actually happens in China. We send American cells to China, then they do the manipulations, and they send them back here. Is that a tenable situation? I mean, I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to that, but I don't think it's tenable.
So you mention in this area of trust, and it's interesting. I'd like to pull up some Gallup polls from many years ago in the 50s. And Jay, I'm very respectful because you were born the day I graduated from Berkeley, so it's not bad. Let's look at a survey from 1954. Will we land on the moon in the 20th century? And the results were 62% said no, and 38% yes. Okay, as you know, it was 15 years later. Then the Gallup poll in 1957. Can we cure cancer? And it was somewhat of a naive question because there's hundreds of types of cancer. But in 1957, the results were, we conquered polio, we'll defeat cancer. So this is right after polio, and 81%. 19% said not in our lifetime. So in a few months in February, we're going to have another session on 55 years after the war on cancer. What did we learn? What did we solve? What didn't we solve? What could we do different from that standpoint? But obviously the American public was expecting a different outcome in the 50s, not understanding how complicated it is. And so when you're addressing chronic disease crisis, for example, it's a priority for you. How should we think about it? How should we understand it? And what role does the NIH play, in your opinion?
Well, first let me just talk about what the chronic disease crisis looks like. The obesity rates in this country are the highest, among the highest in the world. We have rates of type 2 diabetes. We have rates of a whole host of chronic conditions that have just risen in prevalence. And that's not just for adults, it's also for children, like the rates of autism are 1 in 31. We have, as I said earlier, life expectancy is flatlined now for over a decade. The fruits of biomedicine in the United States have not translated over to better health for Americans. That's both because that maybe the kinds of advances we've had in biomedicine have been accessible to a relatively small number of people, or applicable. I mean, there's been amazing things that look miraculous to me. In the mid-90s, if you'd asked me that would we have a cure for sickle cell anemia, which we do, I would have said no chance, not in my lifetime. And yet we have that. But at the same time, we have vast populations of people that are suffering. And so it's going to take more investments in biomedicine. It's going to take better understanding, investments in biomedicine that are not necessarily as sexy. Like, how do you reduce the price of cell-based therapies, of cell therapies? How do you change the equation so that we focus on things? Like we had this huge advance in antibiotics in the mid 20th century, and it made the price of treatment for infectious disease to almost nothing, made it accessible to the entire population. The investments we've made in the last 30, 40 years have translated over to very, very expensive treatments, not always accessible to so many people, and in ways that have not translated over to better health for hundreds of millions of people. We have to change that, and I think investments that the NIH can make, as well as a better understanding of how to deliver the care that we discover to broader populations, both need to happen.
You've emphasized that the NIH should prioritize innovative research over incremental research. How does that translate into practice?
Well, the problem in biomedicine is one of the reasons why we, at this point where we haven't emphasized innovative research, is that in biomedicine we punish failure too heavily, right? Just to take it from the point of view of a young scientist, they have a great idea, and they go spend their 20s doing research in some university. Then they try their idea out, it doesn't quite work out, and they're gone. You can contrast it with Silicon Valley, where you have a whole ecosystem of young people with great ideas, most of which doesn't work out. They get second chances. We have an ethos in biomedicine that essentially tells young people that they can't try out their ideas out early enough. It's actually, if you look at some data that I worked on, young people are the ones that are most likely to have new ideas and publish them in their published work. We have to change the ethos of biomedicine to allow failure to happen. We have to treat, and this is something the NIH can and will do. Like I'm going to start to evaluate the portfolio of investments we make, not project by project, where the requirement is that every project has to be a success. Because if you do that, the portfolio as a whole will be a failure. Right? You have a portfolio of 50 projects, 49 of them fail, and the 50th solves type 2 diabetes. That's a successful portfolio. And I want to change the ethos of how we evaluate research at the NIH to have that kind of mindset.
So Jay, you're not the only one that's talked about young people. There was a woman named Pearl Buck. And if we put up this quote, "The young do not know enough to be prudent. They therefore attempt the impossible and achieve it generation after generation." And when we've analyzed Nobel Prize winners over the years, many of them are in their 60s for ideas. So let's look at two young people. Einstein was 26. Salk was 30. Madame Curie had already won 2 Nobel Prizes by this time she's 45, which is close right now to when a person gets their first grant from the NIH. She had already achieved 2 Nobel Prizes, and Galileo. And so what you've often said, and I've heard you said, I mean, we just want to show you some young people here. Watson was 25 and Newton was 23. So a lot of times you've talked about people want to work on their ideas. They don't want to spend 10 years working on someone else's idea. How do you create this venture capital idea inside the NIH? You know, yes, you have ARPA-H, which we all worked on bringing reality, but how do you take this world of Silicon Valley that you lived in for 25 years and bring it to maybe the most important medical research institution in the world?
I mean, the ecosystem of biomedicine is broken in that exact way, right? So in order for a young researcher to have a chance at trying their new ideas out, you do a PhD, then postdoc 1, postdoc 2, postdoc 3. You're into your 40s before you have a chance and to even get any support. That has to change. And this is despite decades of investments in young researchers in biomedicine. There's a sense that if you invest in older research, in sort of well-established researchers, you're going to get a product that will work. We emphasize methods and guarantee of success rather than the promise of transformative change. The key thing, I think, is not just, I mean, we absolutely have to continue investing in young researchers. That's an absolute must. But we also have to change the ecosystem so that the young researchers actually can make the leap in independence much earlier. And we have to be willing to say, look, some of those investments are not going to pay off. But some of them will end up with the next Marie Curie. Some of them will end up with the next Francis Crick or something, right? So some of them will end up with resulting in huge advances. The Silicon Valley ethos, the idea is it's okay if lots of your investments fail. The portfolio as a whole is what matters, not the single investment one.
So let's look at that slide they just put up. This is testimony to the failure of my medical philanthropy in the 1980s. So we used to give the most money to people at the peak of their career, then mid-level, and then young scientists. So we analyzed it in our Center for Strategic Philanthropy. What happened to all these young scientists we gave money to? Well, one, those at the peak of their career, 7% of them had further work, which they did. 100% of all the young people were still working in the field and have careers. So I think, we've all been trying to figure out, maybe they wouldn't be going back to China if they had more opportunities here from that standpoint. Okay, so you've now spent 8 years at the NIH, not 8 months.
Oh my God.
We're looking back
it feels like 8 years, Michael.
We're looking back at your career, and if you said, okay, these are the 3 or 4 things that we accomplished, what would they be?
One, we reestablished trust with the American people. Post-COVID, I can completely understand why so many American people now distrust scientists, why they distrust doctors. 8 years from now, we've made investments so the American people's health is better, and they can see that the investments we made translate over to better health for them. We actually do make America healthy again. 2, we haven't talked so much about this, but the replication crisis in science. The idea that so much of science is published and people don't know what they can't trust it, so that you have to biomedical, pharmaceutical companies will invest in checking the results of the published biomedical literature. We solved it so that the scientific literature is known to be actually accurate, right? If negative results are published, we have a solid scientific literature. And then 3, we've made the investments in young researchers and in innovative ideas so that the whole ecosystem makes America the world-leading place where there's no question. If you want to do biomedicine, if you want to do research in biomedicine, if you have great ideas, you come here. Just like Silicon Valley was maybe still is the place to do it if you wanted to invest in a career in computation.
So we have hundreds of people with us today and thousands watching you online. What do you want us to do? In the room, we mainly have people who've devoted their life to medical profession in some way. What is your call of action today for all of us?
I mean, I think the main thing is we have to think very, very differently. We can't just keep doing the same thing and expect people to want to support us. It's been a challenging environment. You started the conversation with the proposed 40% cut in the NIH budget, which when I said, and I responded to you that I found it really interesting and important that there's such a broad bipartisan coalition that wants to continue investing in the NIH. The reason why the 40% cut has resonance is because of this loss of trust. We have to take seriously why that loss of trust happened. And that's my challenge to everyone listening and everyone in the room. It's not enough to say, well, the American people don't understand. The American people understand very, very, very well. And we have to change how we act. We have to make fundamental rethinking of what we do to regain that trust with the American people. And I think that's the challenge I would have, is like, let's have our minds open. The pandemic era was absolutely terrible for the openness of people's minds to talking with each other over ideas that they disagreed with. I was subject to censorship by the American government. We have to turn the page on that and get back to what America does best, which is we listen to each other, we make investments in the ideas that matter, we're open, it's not a coincidence that the United States leads in biomedicine and has for the past century. It's because we're the freest country on earth, And if we can return to that, we will have another century of world leadership in biomedicine.
So there was a Nobel Prize winner, Bob Fogel. You might have read some of Bob's work, and he was a good friend. And he put out that chart of 12,000 years of human history. And it showed for 1,000 years, no increase in population, no increase in per capita income. And this amazing growth of the last 200 years here, when we look at it. Now, I tried to tell Bob that I didn't see high-yield bonds on that chart, as providing capital to thousands of businesses. But when we just think about what that unbelievable growth is attributed to it, and Jay, that slide said more than 50%. So we gave ourselves a lot of leeway, somewhere between 50 and 100 of growth. But just look at it. CRISPR, precision medicine, the Genome Project here. Each one of these, germ theory, antibiotics, we just don't really appreciate the importance of what this has done to extend your life, to extend mine and others, and the quality of the life. And so in April of 2020, I started doing podcasts because I was concerned that if I'm talking to the head director of the NIH or the CEO of Johnson & Johnson about what we're going to do, that the American public or anyone in the world could come in and listen and see what the discussions were. So if I was trying to motivate them, or what was the CEO of E&Y doing with 350,000 employees all over the world during that period of time as the pandemic started. So I've noticed that you launched a podcast in June of this year, 2025, called The Director's Desk. Your weekly conversations on scientific careers, leadership, and innovation. I don't know how many people in the room have listened to your podcast, but we hope after today that many will. What was your goal in launching a podcast as a director of the NIH?
First of all, let me just say it's been frustrating the last month of the shutdown because I've not been able to have my podcast. It's just, and I had a podcast before I had joined the NIH, actually. Started in 2022 or 2023. And I found it to be a really nice, a great way to be able to talk with very, very interesting people that weren't getting a lot of attention. Scientists mainly. It was mostly, at the beginning, mostly about the pandemic, but then it broadened out. As the NIH director, one of the perks I have is access to some of the very best scientists in the world, the most interesting scientists in the world, both at the NIH and outside the NIH. I wanted to highlight for the whole world what people like that, how they think about the world, how they think about the major challenges that we face in the world. That's what I'm hoping the podcast can be. Actually, also partly to inspire young people to want to enter science. Because I think if you hear scientists and you hear the excitement in their voice about the ideas that they have, and people are going to want to do science.
And have that podcast been helpful communicating with the thousands of people that work for the NIH, who, when they saw those headlines about cuts, were worried?
I mean, the podcasts primarily have been about science. I've tried to not have too much politics in the podcast. Maybe you're suggesting I should. I don't know. But the discussion over the budget has been tremendously frustrating to me, because what I've seen is the president, when he hired me, challenged me to have the United States be the leading nation in the world in biomedicine. That's where the administration's heart is. There's also deep concerns about the American budget, which is trillions of dollars in debt, and so I can understand why people want to trim what we do, trim what the American government does. But what I've seen is that there's bipartisan support for the NIH in particular. Leave aside the whole rest of the budget. And the reason is what you showed, Michael, is that the investments that we make have the potential to absolutely transform our lives for the better. And I think that's that's what has me most excited about being an NIH director, to make sure that those investments happen, that we don't become involved with like ideological fights that we can't win, but rather we just accomplish our mission, make the investments in science that make the lives and the health of people better. If we do that, I think 50 years from now, people will look back and say we accomplished a lot.
Well, you've got a big assignment to keep Bob Fogel's chart going here from that standpoint. And I think what we have tried to really emphasize is bioscience is more than your health. It's agriculture and food. It's air. It's water. It's energy. It's all of these things. And Jay, we're excited about seeing you turn the NIH into a venture capital powerhouse. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much.